Hi everyone. In the wake of yesterday's post, in which I asked how many of you would like updates on the situation here in South Africa, pretty much all of you who responded were positive. So I figured I'd give you a short little update here. I'm not doing any fancy editing, and you all know what I look like. I just wanted to let you know what's going on. So currently, things aren't great in South Africa. Unemployment is around 35%, which is a massive number when you consider the size of our population runs into the tens of millions. Because of my cerebral palsy, I receive government benefits, so I've spent a lot of time at the social welfare office, and I can tell you firsthand something that's really scary is the fact that generally the people in that office, and there are hundreds every day, are not mostly old people. They're not on pension benefits. It's young single mothers. And the reason for this is there's a lot of instability in the black community in South Africa. And young people, mostly women in their 20s, get pregnant either by accident or on purpose, and then just live off of the grant money that they are given by the government. The problem is that the grants we receive, the social grants, are nowhere near big enough to support even one person on a monthly basis, let alone children of 2 or 3 or 4. Personally, I really don't like the fact that I'm in the position where I need to rely on government resources. But the fact is that disabled people in South Africa have an even harder time. Something like only 1% of us is gainfully employed. I happen to be employed because I have skills that are of use to people. My writing skills keep me from being unemployed for too long. But before this job that I have now, editing a monthly newsletter for a national law firm, I was unemployed for 8 months. And even this current job only pays just a little bit more than our national minimum wage. So, yeah, I'm in a situation where I can't really help but to rely on any assistance I can get. Now, because of all the current unrest in this country, even though I am employed currently, my job could end at any given moment, simply because our economy is in the toilet. So the South African rand currently hovers at around 15 rand to $1. That means that your currency in the States is worth 15 times what ours is. If I do lose this job, I'm pretty much screwed because with things the way they are, future job prospects are pretty much non-existent for someone like me. I live in a lower middle class suburb about 20 minutes away from the coast of Durban. So that's where I was the other day when I posted the photo of the lighthouse. And in this suburb, crime is an almost weekly occurrence. But that's no different to anywhere else in South Africa. I've often been asked, can't you move somewhere safer? And the answer to that is no, not really. Because if you're in South Africa, you are at risk of being robbed or murdered. That's just how it is. And these criminals, a lot of them aren't just your common thugs. These guys develop into sophisticated syndicates and often target the very wealthy complexes. Like, there are some very wealthy people that live on the beachfront, and they are not immune to crime because the criminals know that they have stuff worth stealing. Some of you may or may not remember that in November of 2014, I was the victim, along with my cousin, who I live with, of a home invasion. We were trying to leave the house one Friday morning, and this was before we had an electric gate, and before I could even transfer in and out of a car myself. So my cousin had put me into the car and then gone to open the gate. He walked back down the driveway, and suddenly there was a guy standing in front of us. At first he said that he wanted a job, and naturally we told him we didn't have a job for him, because that's not an uncommon question to be asked in this country. But when we told him we didn't have a job for him, he said, "Don't do anything stupid, I just want your stuff." He then forced my cousin back into the house. I was trapped inside the car, obviously, because not being able to walk, and my wheelchair was nowhere near me. So for 45 minutes, I basically sat and waited to die. Because at the time, I worked for an emergency response coordination service, basically like 911 in the US. And so I know from dealing with those cases where other people were victims of crime that generally when you get robbed, you aren't left alive, because it's just expedient for the criminals to leave no witnesses. Fortunately, that day, I was supposed to be at a meeting with a colleague, and when I didn't show up for the meeting and he couldn't get hold of me because the thief had taken my phone, he came to check where I was, and he always is armed when he leaves the house. So, because of him, we were pretty much safe from being killed that day. Some of you listening to this might think that the experience of being robbed and almost killed would have turned us, my cousin and I mean, into racists, but it hasn't. Because the thing about South Africa is that the majority of black people are not criminals. The majority, even the very poor ones, would rather dig around in the garbage we put out to see if they can salvage anything useful than rob someone else. The criminal element in this country is actually a very small minority of people, but the problem is that the criminals that we do have are extremely violent and think nothing of human life. So there are lots of cases where people are robbed and killed, and all the criminals get away with is a cell phone that's probably worth a couple $1,000. Now, I have to ask you, would you value a human life at a couple of R1,000? I don't think so. But the criminal class in this country don't think like humans. They've got no conscience whatsoever. So, yeah, pretty much you live in a state of heightened paranoia all the time, because you don't think everyone around you is a criminal. But the problem is, when you meet strangers, you don't actually know whether they are or aren't, because white people are the minority in this country, and we are kind of surrounded on all sides by very poor communities, and there's a lot of resentment that grows in them. Now, I know a lot of you want me to talk about the land expropriation issue, and I will, but I'm going to tell you something that directly contradicts the mainstream media narrative, which is the same narrative pushed by the African National Congress, our ruling party. Everyone from the mainstream media and the ANC would like you to believe that the land expropriation thing is a matter of race, that it's an issue of black versus white, when in actual fact, it's not that at all. This is simply a smokescreen being used by the ANC to further its communist agenda. As I have already said, most black people actually just want to get along and live in peace with white people and the Indian people and the colored people that are also native to South Africa. But the ANC wants to keep us divided and hateful in order to retain their political power, because literally billions of rand every year just disappears out of state funds into the pockets of politicians. Something you might not be aware of is that more than half of the unused land in the province that I live in, which is called KwaZulu-Natal, is already owned by the government, and a large portion of what isn't owned by the government is held in a trust which belongs to the king of the Zulu tribe. So there's already a lot of unused land that could be given to poor people to live on, or even to farm if they wanted to. But the ANC and its functionaries don't care about properly administrating this country. What they care about is power and the ability to loot government funds as they see fit. Something I've just realized is that for those of you who don't know much about South Africa, my use of the phrase colored people might sound like a racial slur. It isn't. In South Africa, the term colored refers to people who are of mixed race, and they represent an entirely separate racial group to blacks, whites, and Indians. So I'm not being racist. That is the term that is accepted here. One of the great ironies of the fact that so much of KwaZulu-Natal's land is held in a trust which belongs to the Zulu king is that when the government announced its plans to expropriate land, the Zulu king got very upset, and he is on record as saying that if the ANC tries to expropriate any of the land that belongs to him or his tribe, they risk starting a civil war with the Zulu nation. And I don't know if you know anything about Zulus or their history, but they are known as one of the most warlike and violent tribes in Africa. In my view, the greatest concern to do with land expropriation is not that the government will sanction official seizure of farms and other homes, but that they have now opened a Pandora's box, because it's very clear from their rhetoric that they are using land expropriation as a political bargaining chip to get votes. But they have no actual plan for how land expropriation would work or what they would do with any land that they expropriate. But because they have said that this is the plan, they have lit a fire under the extremists in their ranks. And the concern is that if they now don't follow through on this promise, the extremists will simply go and take land by force without any leadership or control. So, no, I don't believe that the government's going to start a white genocide, although I could be wrong. But I think the biggest concern is the fact that in their arrogance and their unwillingness to risk losing power, they have said things which motivated the extremists, and now they've set the country on a course which will be very difficult to turn back from. Another thing specifically about the farm murders is that given their frequency and the brutality of the way people on farms are dealt with, there is some evidence that the government may in fact be colluding in these crimes. But I cannot state that definitively because there simply isn't enough evidence. You have to understand that unlike the state, for example, which widely publishes its crime statistics, our government deliberately hides and messes with the numbers in order to give a false impression of what life is really like here. So yes, there may in fact be government collusion in the farm murders, but I can't say for sure, simply because I don't have enough evidence to say so. I think that just about wraps up everything of value that I have to say, but before I sign off, I wanted to answer a question that I frequently get asked. On an almost daily basis, some of you ask me to let you know if there's anything you can do to help. The honest truth of that is that if you want to help me and give me a better life, then consider financially supporting the videos I produce. As I've said, the US dollar is worth around 15 times more than the rand. So even if you provide small amounts, $10, even $5, those add up really quickly and they will help me to improve the quality of my daily life. For those of you who remember the GoFundMe that was launched out of the kindness of your hearts when you were trying to get me over to the States, as I promised you, I have not touched that money. That money has been reinvested into my investment portfolio, which got drained during the 8 months that I was unemployed. And I don't touch it because that will be my nest egg if, for whatever reason, I suddenly become unemployed again. But if you want to help me have better quality of life on a daily basis, then as I said, please just consider giving small amounts for the videos that I produce via PayPal. I'll leave my address on the screen, so if you are feeling generous, that's how you can get some shekels my way. I hope that this little report of mine has been helpful to you, and should anything of relevance happen in the next few days, I'll do another one.